Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Hotline League. We are diving into free agency as we're a week out from it being wrapped. It's a bit of a quieter week here on Hotline, but it's going to be a really interesting week because oftentimes the weeks where we don't have to discuss the latest boring drama, who said what, why are NA pros terrible, blah, blah.
Results, who wants to talk about results of a match or series?
Yeah. These are actually the best episodes, in my opinion, where we just get to do some broader topics. And the broader topic this week is going to be, how did free agency go? How's it different? What's going on? We've got a great guest to talk about that. But first, let me introduce my constant co-host, Mark Zimmerman. How's it going, Mark?
Ours fine. I'm sure that you're trying to include the audience in this. It's going good. Had a great Thanksgiving, visited Ashley's family, came home, and today, for the first time in years, I called Kaiser Permanente and I said, you know what? I should go see a doctor.
Oh.
It's been years.
Wait, how many years?
Big moment. Years. I don't know. Maybe 4, 5.
Okay. Why is there a specific reason why you felt like this was important to do?
I was supposed to do it at the start of the year. I said, Ashley wanted me to do it, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then I didn't do it. And now it's like this is maybe the deadest week I'm looking at, and I should really do it. So
when are you going? And this is
December
just a physical, 13th. Right?
Yeah, it's just a physical. But the real reason is I want to go see a dermatologist. I got a lot of moles on me, Yeah. I feel like I definitely have melanoma.
Yeah, when I look at you when we're out in the sun, I worry a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I got to go get checked. So this is how bad it is. Like, I don't know if I've seen a doctor since my parents' healthcare lapsed. Even though I enrolled, I just don't think I saw anyone. So they had no information on me, and so I was like, hey, I need to go see a dermatologist, and they're like, great, you need a referral from your primary care physician. And they're like, oh, you've never seen one, despite being enrolled with us for 3 or 4 years or something, whatever it is, 5 years.
I think probably more than that, because I bet you your healthcare lapsed at like 26.
Yeah. I ran out on my parents' one. I think I missed the special enrollment period and the first open enrollment period. I paid the Obama tax.
You didn't have health insurance for a while?
Yeah, of course not. I'm spry. I'm healthy.
You're such a fucking mess. Okay.
I've only had a collapsed lung for a little bit.
I feel that
there's probably no. Yeah. Anyways, I had to talk to the Kaiser Permanente people for a while, giving them all my rundown on my history, so I can get my first visit with a primary care physician to then get a referral to the dermatologist. So living my best life in the American healthcare system.
Anyway, shout out to Alienware and Grubhub for sponsoring the show. I don't know how to segue out of what just happened there, but we'll talk more about them later. Our special guest tonight is none other than Andrew Barton, who's actually, you're not the GM. What are you these days officially?
Yeah, so my official title is Director of Athletics, and so I am running Rocket League, Valorant, Dota 2, and League of Legends. But essentially, it's a very similar role to a general manager and in charge of all of our competitive rosters related to those titles. So I will jump back and forth in between League, Dota, Rocket League, Valorant, all our titles throughout the year. So in charge of them all.
Well, fantastic. I'm glad to have you on the show. I mean, the big thing is you are integral to the off-season for LCS, yes?
Yeah, correct. So I pretty much run point on that entirely. When, summer ends, we're immediately looking at off-season. So we've been working at it since September, even though we were in Worlds and whatnot. We're always working at it the second the season ends.
Yeah. I always feel like it's got to be kind of weird where you're like watching, because this happens oftentimes. Like I start to hear rumors, not necessarily with EG, but with other teams where they're at Worlds, and you start to hear like, oh, maybe they're going to pick up this person. Oh, this, and it's just kind of a strange situation, but I guess that's just the way it works, right?
Yeah, and I think you have to, because the teams who are not at Worlds are already making moves and having those conversations. And so if you're not there, you're really just getting left behind. So I would not be doing my job properly if I was not in that room having that same conversation. It's part of the process.
Well, I'm glad to have you on the show. Anyway, Mark, anything else that's been going on with you lately before we get into kind of the broader topics?
In terms of media, I got swamped for a while. There's a lot of good stuff. I never finished the Midnight Club. I was working on 1899. I still didn't finish that. White Lotus, New Survivor. There's a lot of good shit going on right now. It's tough to keep track of everything I've watched in recent days.
Well, I finished Rings of Power, and my suggestion is, because I want to talk to you about it, because you have talked a lot about it. And my suggestion is that after the show is done, we talk about it for 5 minutes whenever I'm not recording.
There's no way that conversation only lasts 5 minutes, and you know that.
I'm happy to have it in 5 minutes. I feel like you're going to need more time.
I mean, you're going to be like, I liked it. Could have been better, but I liked it. And that's all you're going to say. No critical eye.
No, I'm happy to have... Let's try it for 5 minutes, and we'll see how it goes, okay?
All right, we'll try, but all right.
Okay. Anyway, what has happened in League of Legends for the past week? Basically nothing, right? You guys announced. Have you announced your full lineup, Andrew?
We have not announced the full lineup, but LCS is known. We have not announced Academy yet, so that's unknown. It's known to me, but it's not in the public. So that's all we've done on the EG end. I can't leak it yet, or I would, but I do need to wait probably 2 days.
I mean, if you announce it here, it'll probably get more attention than it will anywhere else. So
that is true, but I thought you weren't big into Academy, so I thought
that's my whole point. And now you understand why.
If a source suddenly whispered in Travis's ears, and he could leak it, but it would be anonymous.
No.
In a Skype message,
but. Yeah, the group Skype message with Mark. Okay, but you announced that. Also, Kelsey got announced, I think, too. Maybe last week, if I recall.
Yeah, so we announced Kelsey as our head of coaching staff, and then we also announced Freeze, who's joining on as the head coach.
Oh, yeah. That's super cool. So Freeze will be reporting to Kelsey?
Correct. Freeze will be reporting to Kelsey, and then Kelsey reports into myself.
Yeah. I think what's so
fun... Who do you
fun...
report to?
I report into Lindsay Migliori, so she is our director of performance here at EG.
Gamer Doc.
Yep.
Oh, right.
And then who does Gamer Doc report into?
She reports into Nicole.
Okay. And who does Nicole report into?
Those would be the investors. So those are the guys with lots of money.
Good. I'm glad we've got the whole string going.
What?
Okay.
The investors
we
don't
talked
report
about
into
the org
anyone?
chart.
They report into God. Okay. So we've got that going. Kelsey got announced. Freeze got announced. I think what's funny is if you went back into 2015, 2016, and you're like, okay, Evil Geniuses will one day be back in the LCS, and Kelsey Moser will be running the coaching staff, and Freeze will be the head coach. It's just very funny to see where everybody ends up after all these years. So, yeah.
You could have even added that EG would have won an LCS championship, and I think people would have been surprised as well.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, in 2015, 2016, LCS had only been around for a couple of years, so it maybe wouldn't have been that crazy. But, yeah. Okay, so what else got announced? We had 100 Thieves announce the departure of almost their entire fucking team. We have a bunch of sort of double reports or double confirmation, whatever you want to say, on all the different teams. So supposedly Prince is coming over, and Summit stuff happening, all this stuff, a lot of things that aren't official have been sort of reported so widely that it feels pretty comfortable to talk about it.
There's been some more Doinby leaks, of course.
Yes. And then I think, is there anything else Twitch chat? Oh, Whippo to TL content creator, which I feel really good about because I just fucking predicted that. Without nobody had even said it, I was just like, this makes the most sense. I know he likes TL. I know Steve likes him. He likes to do content. He doesn't seem to be going anywhere else. I bet you anything this is what happens. And then I was right. What else? I think that's it. Oh,
Nuggery retired. Summit said one thing about LS that was almost non-existent, and it managed to be a whole thread.
Yes. Well, it's been a slow news week. And then also we had it hasn't been leaked what the TSM's Academy thing is. Oh yeah, EV.
People were mad about that.
Yes, exactly. That's why I think it's interesting. LCS EV reported the 2023 TSM Academy rosters: Hansers, Svenskeren, Triple, Wild Turtle, and Dragku. And a lot of people got upset, especially about the Hanser, Svenskeren, Wild Turtle aspect of it. So, there we go. Let's see. I think that's mostly it. If Twitch chat has anything that I'm forgetting. No, they're talking about a bunch of random stuff. Okay. So I think we can. Here's how the show will go. It might be a shorter episode today unless we feel like we're getting really great takes. So it's all on you, callers. If you want to make sure that we get a full 2 hours, you need to make sure that you're giving us great takes. We don't need to talk exclusively about free agency if people want to talk about other things too. Was that your question, Mark?
No, I was going to say also, if you're listening on YouTube tomorrow and you see this is like an hour and 20-minute episode, it's your fault too for not being here live and bringing your own questions. We gotta shame our entire audience, not just the live ones.
And when Mark says questions, that's a good point because I think normally we do takes. Still want to do a bunch of takes today, but I need to move the sub thing from Andy's face. Okay. But if you have questions for Mr. Barton here about leading the efforts in the free agency period, the offseason stuff, or if you have general questions about how this stuff works, I think this is a great time to kind of get some of those questions in. So feel free to show up with some questions. One thing that I want to make clear, based off of, so we had Mr. Barton here on live Hotline League during Worlds. We had somebody come up and just flame the EG content team for 15 minutes straight. We can't. He does not have any involvement with the content or marketing team, so you'll have to save that for another time. Also, I just noticed that we need to, Numi, if you're in the chat, we need to update the Grubhub code. It is not TG off season; it's TG free agency. Which I love that they're coming up with these codes. So I'll just put that in chat, and then we can get that updated if.
So since you brought up content, there's actually the first person I pulled is about content. So this is perfect.
Okay.
Excellent.
Again, we can't. Okay. Well, off he goes. So first off, thank you to some subs. We have. Okay. Sorry, I still have a little bit of a cough. Nuclei, RSG, Aerohydrus, the Wafflefoot, Gengarifith, Jason Krieg, Xander Gage, and Suburban Marty. Thank you, Suburban Marty, for the prime. We'll read off some more subs here in a second, but we got Ventus official here. Ventus, where are you calling from?
The DC area.
The Virginia. DC area. And you're going to flame EG content?
Sort of.
Nice.
Okay. Again, Andrew Barton does not work on the marketing, like team ops, competitive operations.
But could he not raise the priority and clear out some scrim and practice time for more content time?
Also, sorry.
Could do that maybe. Maybe the public would enjoy us focus on content rather than World's results. We can think about that.
Well, how much did focusing on World's results do this year?
True.
Got you out of plans, I guess.
On to the take.
Got you out of plans. Okay, so Ventus, what do you want to talk about?
Okay, so my loaded question for Andy is, why does it feel like esports teams don't give a fuck about content? And I want to say, like, as a fan, especially since franchising started, it feels borderline insulting to be like a fan of certain teams.
We're literally just running it back with the same experience that he had at the live show, Mr. Zimmerman. Okay, whatever. Continue on.
Do you want me to be honest? I have I can't remember those shows for the life of me.
You don't remember? We had
during all of them.
We had Andy on the first episode where we were where we had the CLG stuff on happening, and then somebody came on and flamed the EG content and marketing stuff, and now it's happening as his first call.
All right. Well, I will say, to EG's credit, they have a channel called The Creative Collective, I believe, and that's actually really good. So shout out to that channel, but nobody knows about it, which is a problem in itself. But it's not just an EG problem. I would say most of the league, except for maybe 2 or 3 teams, fall into this, and so I'm really wondering, what is it about content that teams just don't want to prioritize at all? Especially considering, I feel like it adds a lot of marketability to players, brands, and even if you want to like flip players for other players in the future, wouldn't you get value by upping their brand value?
So, yeah, here let me recontextualize at least for the beginning of this too. Sorry. There is I have heard, so I've complained a lot recently, Andy, about privately and publicly about the lack of content from teams. And something I've heard from a lot of team people is players don't want to do content anymore. I can't get them to do content, blah, blah, blah. So rather than sort of making it as much about the marketing side, which we can still talk about, I also kind of want to get your perspective as somebody who's on the player and on the team side to kind of get insight into how that balance works between, as you said before, like focusing on Worlds results, focusing on content. Not to say I feel like it's a bit of a false dichotomy, but yeah, I'm kind of curious, how you approach that stuff, and if you feel like you see a lot of back and forth on all that.
So I think really when this trend kind of started to become more talked about was really at the beginning of 2020 when COVID became a thing. And so, for us at EG, we were on lockdown all of 2020, even all of 2021. And so we could not perform a single bit of content. And it really wasn't until actually 2022 where we kind of opened that back up to starting to do content. So you basically had 2 years where players, got to live a great life with no content, just practice, do everything. And I think, I don't want to say we have forgotten that sport entertainment and content is a part of this job. But I do think like the last 2 years with COVID and not having to perform a lot of those deliverables played a big factor. And so, for us this year, we started the EG files, which, we had weekly filming every week. All of the players knew about it. And, at first a little resistant to it, but by the end we were actually having a lot of fun and it just became part of the routine. And so I think for most teams, it's going to be about getting back to that set routine of content. Because again, those last 2 years during COVID, I mean, we can look back. I think almost no teams did content. And from that point on, players became much more resistant to content. And we kind of have to push them back in that direction, remind them that, hey, this salary is not just for paying, for your competitive results. There's also a marketing component in this in order to build up the brands.
Can I interject a little bit? Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah. You go first.
So I have a few things come to mind. First of all, I do think the EG players themselves are creating their own content with their Twitter videos a lot of the time. So I feel like they're already making content. And I think Revenge is a good example of this on Immortals, who's like he cares about his brand value. And the other aspect is like it's also, I feel like there's a big difference between asking players to do content for a sponsored thing, like, hey, we have to fulfill this deliverable, and like what something they would actually want to make, as like weird as that would sound. But it's like, what is Jojo watching on YouTube? Like, he might not want to make a league video, but maybe he is binging cooking channels. And if you're like, oh, well, would you want to do a cooking thing because that that's what he wants to watch? Like, I feel like there are steps in between this. And then there's also like a logistical question of like, it's not just do players want to make content, because you're always going to have players who don't. But let's say you have a person on your league team who is super into fighting games and is down to do content, and someone on your Valorant team who is super into fighting games and down to do content, and Project L drops. Is it even logistically possible to have those two people like compete, assuming that they are down for content, to do like, oh, EG versus like EG Valorant versus EG League in Project L? Like, logistically, is that possible? Not even like assuming the players are down for it.
So for that specific example, that will be possible by EG, because we're going to be moving offices in about 2 weeks, because we're having Valorant and League of Legends in the same office. So that's underway, and we'll be able to do stuff like that. But I actually think what a lot of the public kind of misses out on, I think you somewhat alluded to it, but it's the more organic content that a lot of teams are missing. And I really believe a function of that actually has to do with moving out of the team house. And I think, when you're in that team house, you're living life with your teammates 24/7, and you can have a lot more of that natural chemistry, synergy, whatever we want to call it. All of that can happen, and you're able to take that inform and use it as content potentially. And I think, most of the teams are now operating in this office and apartment lifestyle. And so you're actually missing out on probably where the meat of that content can actually happen, probably happening after practice when many of the players have gone home. So that's another factor I actually take into account. It's, the lifestyle that we live now at the LCS.
Okay.
Does
I was
that
gonna say,
answer your question, Ventus?
Yeah, but I'm still curious on what Mark has to say.
Yeah, of course.
I feel like the content question in the LCS has become more difficult to answer in recent years, because I feel like the team docuseries thing just can't be, it's not sustainable really. And like the thing about a lot of content is like how you pay for it. And at least like with serialized content and things that are going to have like certain weekly releases, or you're getting sponsorships that might involve this kind of stuff, like it kind of forces you into certain boxes. But I'm not sure what the most successful like team content in recent years have been ever since like the docuseries explosion. Like
probably the
I still
FlyQuest
think-
stuff, honestly.
I was gonna say it's probably the FlyQuest stuff, but that kind of, I don't want to say it was like, it just wasn't really like repeatable in a sense. Like how many people have Decoy and Jose Diota that you can tap into? Like I think they did some good things, but other than them, I'm not quite sure I'm not 100% certain what kind of content LCS fans are most hungry for. And I know you've talked about some of these things and you might find those interesting, but I'm not sure they're going to hit a broad appeal. And so I definitely think like the quiz type stuff is a good place to start. That seems to do well based off Travis's own content, or like those kinds of things. And I also feel like I'm just like not quite sure where else it goes from there.
Well, I think, when we talk about content, there's like the weekly serialized content, but then there's also content that you can make around specific situations. Like I know Spica did the funny thing where he was like choking Bjergsen and all that stuff during that time where there was conversation about, I don't know, controversy or something around TSM, and so he kind of like made that joking thing where he was being a jerk to people. I think another thing that I've been thinking about recently is like, and I say this again, just want to reiterate, Andrew Barton, not in charge of content or social stuff at EG, but I have been disappointed about how many teams, including EG, have been announcing their roster changes with JPEGs on Twitter. And I think, oftentimes what you hear from team folks is, oh, it's so expensive, or the logistics of it are really difficult, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing I've thought about is I bet you the most popular, or at the very least most memorable announcement video of all time was a single camera, poorly acted video of Peter in a trash can, and Bjergsen pulling him out of it to join the team. And like that was back when people didn't really have content budgets and everything was very scrappy and all that stuff. And I feel like those videos oftentimes do, like, if it is more about like the goofiness or fun of the content than it is like the high production. And so I think there are ways to do, in my mind, almost anything is better than a JPEG. So I just like, I feel like there's a lot of opportunities that teams are not pursuing that are logistically easy or lightweight or whatever. You just have to kind of have somebody who's down to try them.
Well, and I think like that's exactly what I'm referencing when I talk about the organic content. It's, having one camera and just kind of shooting that stuff really raw and seeing what you can pull from there. Because I think that's probably what the audience is looking for. I think the high class, high production stuff is excellent. But at the end of the day, like so many memes and everything have originated just from that grassroots content stuff.
Yeah. Yep. So, go ahead.
I will say, so I do have a little bit of experience with this, mainly in like the Smash scene, but nothing more like individualized experience. So nothing like what any esports org would be doing with like entire teams. But in my experience, I feel like as like the marketer content role or guy or whatever, it's like you want to enable people to make content more so than you want necessarily to like force them into doing content that feels like it's conflicting with like their actual goals in the game or goals with what they're trying to pursue. But I think that if you actually talk with people as or two players individually, there's always a line of like, oh, okay, I would be willing to do this, and this would actually be like really cool to me. So I don't actually think there's like super serialized series necessary that would be like the future meta of esports content. I feel like it would be really tailored to whatever the players themselves are like or would want to make or feels fulfilling to them. And I also think that's like going to also add the most to their brand value. That just in my experience, I don't know how to do it with like, or how it works with an entire team of people, but that is just my opinion on the situation, I guess.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ventus, for the call. Anything you want to shout out before we go on to the next caller?
Alienware, Grubhub, Turn Down for Walt on YouTube, and the Small Victory Project on TikTok.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll catch you later.
Thank you.
All right. We're off to the next caller. Thank you to T-Bone, sandytoes, Flick Nickum, Dana Roach, lazerfruit, and Perchy99 for the subs. We've got Mark grabbing the next caller. If you're just joining us, we have Andrew Barton, who leads competitive stuff as a GM role for multiple teams at EG, including the League of Legends side. And so he's chatting with us about free agency stuff and apparently also content. Sandy Toes is here. Sandy, where are you calling from?
Calling from Arlington, Virginia, also in the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay. Also, wait, you have a very familiar voice. Are you somebody here incognito?
No, but we did talk at New York group stage. You interviewed me for the NA's Out of Groups How Do You Feel video.
Okay.
Twitter.
Maybe that's what it is then. What do you want to talk about on the show?
So my take, so I am a huge FlyQuest fan, and I wanted to note that I think there's sentiment in the community that people think FlyQuest spent big this year. They really opened the wallets. In my opinion, the reality is that the LCS has actually achieved some small level of salary parity due to, and this is in part due to some of your reporting, salaries crashing hard this offseason. That's why FlyQuest can spend for a top 3 roster, and that's why a team like, as well, Dignitas can make the upgrades they got. You know, they got some really good players for, for a team that people do not usually expect to be that huge. And that's why you've got, 6 to 7 teams that all have really, really, really good players on the roster. So overall salaries have dropped, causing payroll parity amongst organizations. And I think that just makes for a more exciting and competitive scene overall when you have 7 or 8 different organizations that can all spend similar amounts and all get high-quality players instead of just 2 or 3 teams that spend millions and everyone else is kind of picking at the bottom of the barrel.
Okay, first off, thank you for having this call, because this was one of the things I was really hoping that Andrew would feel comfortable talking about on this episode, because we've kind of had there's this kind of weird dead zone where like games end, worlds happens, et cetera, then nobody on the team side really talks publicly forever because they're like heads down secretly building all these rosters and stuff. All the rest of us are talking about all the work they're doing, but they can't say anything. So now that things are wrapped, I'm hopeful, Andrew, that you'll be down to kind of chat with us about, what the behind the scenes looked like this year for free agency and the LCS in general, not just with EG. And yes, how much of the sort of assumptions and rumors of us seeing very dramatic changes in salaries and all that stuff came through.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting take, and I'm really excited the way you framed it, because I think payroll parity is extremely important. Now, another factor of that was last year you saw many players not wanting to play for specific organizations, and I think a lot of that changed this offseason, and that led to a lot more payroll parity. So I think that's really important. But going back to, overall offseason, how it went, I thought this year was really interesting with EU moving at like 1,000 miles per hour at the end of October. And a lot of NA was, I don't want to say doing much, but we couldn't do anything. Or at least, personally, I felt a little paralyzed because you are being put on really interesting deadlines by European teams. And you're not sure what dominoes that's going to create in the US here or what it's going to do in EU. So I think that's a big reason why we didn't see a lot of EU imports come to NA. And it's because EU locked up all their stuff by early November. So I thought that was really interesting. Once Europe locked up, that's when North America could start it moving, because all the dominoes happened over there, so we can start our own. And then kind of just going back to payroll parity, this is really important, I think, for the health of the league. Last year I felt like you had maybe 4 or 5 teams really competing for top 3. And then, the other teams were just like, okay, wherever the results land, great. And so, now that we're seeing more players spread to lower tier teams, you're seeing more parity in the league. And that's what I really want to see, because I think that'll drive the overall health of the region. I know for, us this last year, I know Peter's alluded to it many of times, but at times it was hard to improve, because when you're stomping 80% of your scrims and not being challenged, that creates real difficulty and wanting to improve your team. And so my big hope for, this next year is we do see more parity, we see more competition, because I think not only will that improve the health of the region, but it'll also, increase viewership, create more intriguing storylines. That way, in summer, it's not very obvious who's going to make it. I think, if we go back, we kind of knew which 4 teams were going to make it. But, for this next year, I really hope we see more parity now that, you have Dignitas coming in with a really great roster. And so, it's exciting to see new teams enter the mix.
Do you think, so there's a bunch of things to dive in there. Is there a world where the payroll parity, and when we talk about payroll parity, perhaps creating competitive parity or much greater competitive parity than we've seen in the league previously, is any of that because not only did you have players go to Dignitas for maybe less money than they would have expected before, but you also had the top end of teams start to pay less. Do you think, obviously Team Liquid, I think publicly implied that they would be spending less this year. So how much of it do you think is the bottom, I don't know, having better players because they're willing to take less, and how much of it was also the top teams spending less?
It's a bit of both, but, I would probably say the top teams are still spending. And I don't think we should sit here and act like the top teams aren't spending as much. I think TL went above and beyond last year, and we're probably not seeing something like that ever again. But it is very apparent to me that the top teams are still spending. And the bigger function is actually seeing these top tier players now probably playing for lower teams. And that's where I think we're actually seeing the biggest component to this parity question.
Gotcha.
And what do you think motivated that change for those pro players if you had to pick? I'm sure each is kind of a case by case basis, but do you think there's any overarching reason that, because it felt like for the last 2-ish years, pros had kind of been well, if I don't get the team I want, I'm sitting, and that's not the case anymore.
I don't know the answer to that, honestly, but I just, you have to think it's not enjoyable sitting there on the sidelines. You want to compete. All of these guys are competitors, and they want to get out there. I can't imagine what you're doing, if you're not playing.
It felt like there was also willingness from a lot of the teams to not rush. Because in the past, LCS has also gone maybe as fast as Europe did this past year, right? Especially certain teams. This year, it felt like a lot of teams were willing to just kind of wait and see what ended up happening. Do you think that's a fair assessment? Because I think also whenever you don't have teams all rushing to try to lock somebody up really quick, then you're just also going to end up in a world where players start to panic because they're not getting locked in super quick. They start to look for other options. They start to take less money. I feel like the speed issue is also a factor.
No, actually, I don't think speed was really affected by payroll or anything like that. I think for this year, there were specific dominoes in NA that kind of held things up from snowballing more or less. So I attribute a lot to the specific dominoes.
Can you say what those dominoes were?
Well, I would say Impact was probably the biggest one, which I think has been known and reported. So obviously Impact had to take his time and figure out his decision, but that was certainly the biggest one.
Yeah. Okay. Mark, I don't know if you have anything else or if we want to throw back to the caller here.
You said that the teams are still spending. Maybe it's been overstated how much salaries. I think there's been a lot of the bubble has burst. People who got 700K are now getting 200K or something. Sounds like you're pushing back against that a little bit. But how do you feel has the market adjusted in any significant way, or do you think it's actually not so different from previous years ago, except for those couple outliers like TL betting the bank on making worlds or something?
No, it's definitely gone down, but I think we're normalizing a little bit more so, which is I think what we wanted to see happen. Whereas last year maybe we hit a plateau, or the year before, and now we're more so normalizing and perhaps downward trending. But it is not as if we've fallen off a cliff. It's just not like that. So I think the narrative that the bubble is burst and all that really has to go away, because these players, everyone is being paid still very well.
I think that's it. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say my final point is I think it's good to note that, because I just can't see a world like FlyQuest being built without still slinging some serious dough,
No.
Getting those players to sign for that org. No offense to FlyQuest, they're a great org, but
LCK was paying considerably. So, I had many conversations with, different folks outside in Korea, and, that region is paying. So,
I'm trying to remember what I was about to ask before. Oh, I remember. I've also heard rumors of teams pulling back on spending on support staff. Obviously we focus a lot on players, but have you heard much about teams pulling back on sort of auxiliary competitive staff?
I don't think I've heard that all that much. I know for, speaking for EG, for example, we definitely have a little bit, but only because, we were approaching about 6 to 7 staff members last year, and we wanted to bring it back to about, 3 to 4 this year. And so it was more so, downscaling a little bit, but bringing it into a little more of a controllable staff to an extent. So I haven't really heard too much on teams downscaling, but it could be possible.
Yeah. All right. Hey, Sandy Toast, does this answer most of your questions?
Yeah. I think the conversation was really good. I think part of my take was that and we don't have to get into it, but I do feel like the LCS is more enjoyable when more teams are competitive. So if more teams are able to spend, equal amounts to get good players, then that's good for the health of the league, because it creates better conflict. It creates better storylines, instead of just having 3 teams fighting for the title and 7 just kind of being the like that Simpsons meme with the monkeys fighting, whatever, and the other teams watching. It's a lot more exciting for the league.
Yep. Thank you so much, Sandy Toes, for the call. And anything you want to shout out?
I do. Speaking of FlyQuest, I and a couple other folks, we do a FlyQuest-centric fan podcast. It's called Flight Check. We do it every Monday night, a couple hours before Hotline League. We're on Twitter, Flight Check Crew, so you can come check us out. Papa Smithy's usually active in our chat these days, now that he's the GM. And FlyQuest to Worlds 2023. Let's go. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for the call, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.
All right.
I do have one quick thing before I expect to sponsor it. Zextrap and Twitch chat said, can people throw out some general numbers? I'm a bit confused with people saying LCK is paying and NA orgs are still paying money and stuff like that. What would be a premium player salary-ish, if you can give a ballpark? Because I know for a while, just under $1 million or something sounded like a kind of going rate for a really great import player, or native player. Like, is that more still the case? Has that gone down a little bit? Like, I don't know how much you can speak to that.
I think for any premium import player, you're probably playing, $1 million to $2 million, probably in this economy.
In this economy, I love that. In this economy, yeah, interesting. If we had got Faker over here, how much do you think he would have had to be paid?
If you remember hearing about us going for Chovy in 2019 or 2020, it's probably even higher than the Chovy numbers. So I would take a look at that and maybe just go way higher.
Okay, very good.
Papa Smithy also dropping some helpful knowledge in chat, says average player on a top 5 team in the LCK in 2022 was making around 1 million. So
that's actually great.
LCK is paying.
That's funny because I feel like if that was not what I don't think the average player on a LCS team, top 5 LCS team was making. I'm trying to think how much
for
like
the top
the high
4 between TL, C9, or maybe not C9, 100 Thieves, EG.
Papa Smithy says it was not. So yeah. I think the average was probably closer to 700. I bet on top 5 teams, and so it's interesting because LCS has this reputation as being like the spend big league. But if what Papa Smithy's saying is true, then yeah. Now, I wonder how much Faker skews that LCK number.
Well, I'm sure Papa's.
I'm sure they use a median. But yeah. I think the reality is I do not consider our paying power to be a comparative advantage anymore for NA.
I was about to go just there because I think that's a huge thing to note, because during the 2016 period, which I think it was true, was like we could tempt people like someday and like, and I know Prince obviously is a different story a little bit, but like obviously we are no longer in the position to be this big lure the way that we might have been financially back in the day. And that was the one thing that people held against North America was like, oh, we're this fucking rich league just, living this life of luxury. And that's not even the case anymore globally. So I do think that like the one arguable advantage people like to say for why because whenever the question comes up, why is NA bad? I like to flip the question around and go, why should NA be good? We are spread on this giant continent with not a massive player base, playing on shit ping.
Because of American exceptionalism, Mark?
Because American exceptionalism. We should be the best, guys. And like the one thing people could say was like, well, you have the money. Just make it work. And now we don't even have the money anymore to like really make that case. So like that's something I think that is really worth noting going forward into the future for LCS.
Yeah. No, it's very good.
No one's saying you shouldn't want to be the best, Kites, but like people get upset when we're not. And the point I'm trying to make when I say this is not that you shouldn't want us to do well, but like you have to think about
Mark, it sounds like you're just willing to accept mediocrity. And what a terrible state for our league whenever personalities in the space
bro, we're not Korea.
Are willing to just accept.
We don't have this insane player base who have cultural.
All I'm hearing are excuses.
Number with
do we need to pull up the excuse wheel?
For the entire country and shit, basically.
Do we need to pull up the excuse wheel, Mark?
We don't have 100 fucking million viewers like the LPL or whatever they have. Anyways,
maybe that's what we do next week. Is we do the excuse wheel episode where our guest is the excuse wheel.
I enjoyed that.
All right. Let's talk about Alienware. Alienware sponsors Hotline League. We love Alienware so much. And I know a bunch of you, I actually really appreciate this. A bunch of you have messaged me over the past, 3 or 4 days telling me that you've been purchasing, in some cases, some fairly big purchases from Alienware, making sure you use my link, which is really great. I have seen a ton of that reflected on the back end because I can actually go in and look and see like how much all of you guys are going to alienware.com/Travis and making especially purchases through that link as well. So I just wanted to use this moment here to thank a lot of you because I know for a couple weeks leading up to this, I was really promoting the Alienware link and promoting the fact that we get a cutback on all of that. It goes straight to helping support TGI. And so I just want to thank all of you guys for using that link. It's really great. If folks are still looking to maybe grab something over the course of the next month, forever, right, as we're partnered with them, but especially as we head further into the holiday season, you can do so over at alienware.com/Travis. It is very much appreciated. And just know that I do see that stuff, and it does make me feel supported by all of you, that you're actually taking the time and going and doing that. It's very, very nice of you all to consider that. So, and I promise that goes back into creating cool content. So thank you so much to Alienware for sponsoring the show. Thank you to all of you for using alienware.com/Travis. There's a link in the description on YouTube if you would like to check it out there. And yeah, thank you so much for sponsoring the show, Hotline, for sponsoring Hotline Alienware. Thank you. Mark is grabbing the next caller. Thank you to Meshbeard, Dustin, and Numi for gifting a sub to Noxwar. Thank you, everybody, for the subs. Mark should be back here in just a second, and I'm going to cough off camera, or rather off microphone. Hopefully this cough is gone by next week. Otherwise, I think Numi's going to scream at me for not going to the doctor. Okay, we've got Mark back here in just a moment, continuing our conversations about free agency and a bunch of different things.
Do you know what it's for?
Fun. What?
You know what it's time for?
What?
A dueling take.
Oh, we haven't done one of these in a while. Are
Yep.
they down? Okay, they're down for this. Okay, so we'll go with our first guest.
Fearadin is first.
Fearadin, where are you calling from?
Calling from the Boston area.
From the Boston area. And what do you want to talk about on the show?
Yeah, so my take is that this Korean-speaking roster that Team Liquid is working with is going to be bad for the league pretty much regardless of how they do, whether they do well or they do poorly, right? So quickly, I'm trying to pull up the actual roster. It is Summit top. In the jungle is, sorry, I'm trying to find the release. I think it's Harry mid and then Yon bot, Core JJ in support, and I forget who the jungler is.
It's rumored to be Umpty, but people aren't sure who it is.
Okay, yeah. But the point is that, like, if it does well, that just speaks to, like, you know, how NA players are, like, being lazy or, you know, not, you know, they're not, like, working as hard as they should. It doesn't do well for branding, because if the entire team is speaking Korean, it's, like, hard to get comms sometimes, which means it's harder to put out, like, good content and videos. And there's, like, you know, people like to root for NA talent, so it's going to hurt the branding in that sense. And on the other side, if they do poorly, then it's a question of, okay, well, you brought in more Korean talent, you brought in Korean infrastructure in the form of coaches, right? You have, like, Marin coaching the team, and yet somehow the team still fails. That means that, like, there's something fundamentally wrong with the region. So there's just, like, no way to me that this, like, helps the team, whether they do well or they do poorly.
All right. And we have another caller here. Mogul, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. I'm going to turn you up. You're a little quiet if you can get closer to the microphone.
Yeah, let me try. Is that better?
Yes, that's better. And what do you want to talk? What's your take?
So essentially, it's basically a counter take. In my opinion, it's kind of a bad faith argument to say that this is a full Korean team, just because you have two NA residents who were in the academy system who clearly deserve their chance in the league by being first in the academy scene for 2 splits in a row on that TL Academy spot coming up. And just because they speak Korean doesn't make them not NA. Point being, you know, Fudge, resident, considered one of the best resident NA top laners from OCE, just like Harry and Yon. And on top of the fact that, you know, you're promoting LA talent, and that alone should be amazing and considered a great thing for the league. People watch Korean. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
People watch Korean talent. It's not like people don't watch subtitled Korean videos. T1 gets tons of views on their videos. So it's not like the people won't watch the content that they make. In fact, it makes it more interesting because people get to shit on the Korean, you know, issue at hand, because people went ham on the Korean 9, if you remember from last year. People love talking about it. It's not like it's not good for content. It's great for content.
I
think it's going to be great for the NA, no matter what.
Do you have statistics at all on how many of the people watching that T1 content are English listeners reading subtitles?
I don't actually. That is something that I don't know. But I feel like just based on LCK itself and the popularity of LCK English, people do watch it. And it's not like they don't watch the people doing the interviews. Like the LCK viewership, I think, was like easily 50K a night, which is comparable to the NA LCS on whenever they don't get the LEC boost.
And so one or two quick things. One, I want to make the note that there's been kind of this weird thing that has happened where people seem to talk about TL using two different phrases. They use Korean speaking. They also use Korean. And these are not always meant functionally in the same way. And so I think what's important to note is like my reporting, and I think the reporting of others has always been that Team Liquid is interested in having a Korean speaking roster, not necessarily saying that they are only exclusively looking to have 5 imported players or imported like a mixture of players that were brought from Korea and then, been here for a while and then bring in others. So I just want to make that distinction.
There's a third class of this kind of Korean conversation, or a third distinction to make, which is also like Korean mentality, like an LCK mentality. I think, and I don't know how confirmed this is, but I do think, based off Core JJ's interview, the team's conversations and stuff, is that they do want to go maybe a little harder than some NA orgs do. And this hasn't been like super confirmed. So this is a lot of, I think, projection from fans, with Marin joining and, Summit coming over and stuff like that. But I do think that there is an assumption that some aspects of the LCK practice regiment will be more adopted by this team than others. And so it's also a proving ground in some sense of how that works in North America to some people. And they'll just say it's a Korean team. And they're not really being clear with whether they mean all Korean players, Korean speaking, or this kind of methodology approach.
Yeah. Okay. And then even just now, I see Maximus Pay in the chat saying the point is that they're brought up in the Korean system with drive, discipline, and work ethic. It's just kind of like a weird.
Two of them aren't, though.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so then are you saying culturally, they're you get into some really weird conversations if you are trying to push in that direction. So I would just say be careful. Anyway, okay, so Mogul, you think that it's a little disingenuous. So let's go back to is it Firedin or Fearden?
It's Fearden. Yeah, I think there's two parts to this, right? It is true a lot of the team is not, they're brought up in NA, or they're I should say they're academy players. They've come up through the NA system. Part of it is branding, right? They're being it seems to me from what I've read, and maybe this is some poor phrasing in articles or headlines or whatever, it's being branded as the Korean team. And maybe it's worth distinguishing whether that's the Korean team or the Korean speaking team. But having Marin as the coach, to me, points to the fact that this is intended to be a Korean team, in a cultural sense, right? And this is bringing over the Korean league culture to North America in the same way that Core JJ wants to do that, right? So even if the team is not a team that is 5 Korean import players, it seems to me that it is a Korean team in essence, regardless of and then the other part of that is again the content stuff, right? Having everyone, if they're doing a docuseries, it's harder to get shots of them playing and stuff like that because they will be speaking Korean, and therefore it's harder to put together a video. I understand people do watch Korean League, but I don't, because I don't like to watch. I don't watch I'm gonna get hated for this. I don't watch subtitles on anime either, because it's
you watch dubs, or you listen to dubs on anime.
Yeah, if I watch anime, I can watch dubs.
Mark, you're muted whenever you're having whatever reaction you're having.
I said we're kicking him because he's a dub listener. Subs for life.
I expected Twitch to get mad at me, but I think the point is just that it lowers the usability of the content.
What if Team Liquid dubs all their content with the players?
Be in there, dude. Let me do their dubs for them. Bad lip reading incoming. Very not culturally offensive for sure.
One thing I might add just to counter that, if TL's one of the rumored junglers for TL has been Umpty, and if they do get into Umpty, I know for a fact that 4 out of the 5 Koreans on this team, or quote unquote Koreans, speak English fluently. So I don't think there'll be a real problem with English speaking content.
Well, to Feriden's point, they won't. It is. I do not think the expectation is that they would be speaking English amongst each other, and if that's the case, it's harder to do fly on the wall.
That's
content.
A lot of the content you're getting.
Yeah.
Is
if you are
live.
not, if you are going with, which historically they have, TL has done a lot of this sort of docuseries content and kind of filming behind the scenes. It is different when you're recording people who are not speaking English, just from a logistical editing perspective, to be clear. All right, let's get Andy B in here now. You've been listening to the callers' takes. Where are you leaning on this?
Yeah, I probably lean towards the second caller. I don't know if I in particular classify this as like a fully Korean roster. You obviously had Harry and Yeon come up from Academy, so I like the second caller's take of there is NA talent on this roster, whatever we want to call it, that has really moved up through the system, earned their spot. So I really do like that. And now you're just supplementing them essentially with KR jungler and then KR top as well. And Summit has already been here, so he understands the way the region works. He's been here. He maybe has assimilated better than others. I will find that out. And then you obviously have Core.
He was here for about 3 months. It's a bit of an extended vacation.
Wait, he assimilated he assimilated so quick, Travis. He did the full cycle in 3 months, where it usually takes players at least a year.
Yeah. Okay.
He's been everywhere, and then you obviously have Core who's been here as well. So I don't know if I look at this team and say it's a full Korean roster. And sure, maybe they're trying to bring over some of those cultural norms with Marin and such, but I don't know. I've just been thinking about that the whole take. So I probably just lean towards the second caller.
All right. So that's one angle of it, is like the classification of this team, which we've debated. But I think Fearden had some other points I want to get your question on. Like, how do you think the community reacts to the success or failures of this team, regardless of how we denominate them? Do you think if this team goes out and stomps there and they do some interviews where they're like, yeah, we're working harder than everyone else in the league, do you think that is a good or bad thing? Do you think that creates just a bad pressure on everyone else to adopt their schedule? Do you think it's a good thing that hey, maybe people do need that kick in the butt? Or what do you think the results of a team Andy, like this will be? I
don't know if you know, but there's if you're familiar with him, Rigby is his name, and he said some things this offseason about NA players and NA player mentality and work ethic, and so to Mark's point, there's already kind of this underlying latent NA lazy, NA bad thing. So if you do suddenly have this team that at least even if you don't see it that way, a decent amount of the community will be like, oh, that's the Korea team, and they start kicking ass, is that going to be an issue for the league?
No, I mean, I think if TL does well, then their scouting work speaks for itself, and they've done a great job. And I think if we see failure in the roster, then that probably is on their scouting side, or they didn't properly understand how to assimilate these pieces into the organization or the region. I think to me, whenever I think about importing players, assimilation is the big thing I think of. Is this player coming here for 1 year? Are they trying to make a life here? Are they trying to actually be a bigger part in this organization? And that for me is everything with imports. And that's probably why I'm more hesitant on the FlyQuest roster or TL roster, because how dedicated are these new imports coming in? And we can sit here and look at the EG roster and go, why have you not utilized your import slots? And I could speak pretty openly and say, I didn't find any imports out there who really wanted to be here, who believed in this region, believed in the roster, and were really ready to, settle down here and make a life for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really, obviously people might have seen my, boomerang emote tweets, where I do think that that's, a pretty big issue with the league right now, and I think that's why there's probably some deserved skepticism. I mean, I boomerang Summit with 2 boomerangs just because I suspect there's a good chance that within the next 12 months I'll have 3 boomerangs for him. We'll see. I want to see how many boomerangs one man can stack, but I think there is some merit to the first caller's concerns because, okay, we don't know what Team Liquid's philosophy was in building this, right? Because behind the scenes, myself and others, you hear, okay, here's what Team Liquid's trying to do. But you oftentimes don't know for teams like what their reasoning or motivation is until you can sit down and talk to people or until things leak more or, I don't know, they have some sort of behind the scenes thing. And one of my concerns is there was a period of time in the league where teams just said, Korean's good, Korea good, Korea good, League of Legends. And so what you did was you tried to find players from Korea, and then you're like, okay, well, we can't bring 5 over, so who around here can speak Korean? Can you speak Korean? And so rather, like, the philosophy would not begin with, let's find 5 good players and, oh, they all happen to speak Korean, that's great. The philosophy would begin with Korean League of Legends good, and then you just work towards that sort of goal, or that becomes your guiding light. And I don't know until they talk about it more, I don't fault them for not talking about it because they haven't announced their roster yet, where, like, how Team Liquid approached this. But if their philosophy was anything Western sucks, we really want to figure out how to build like the best Korean style roster where, you know, scrim discussion takes place in Korean and we have a Korean coach and blah, 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 then I worry a little bit about that philosophy. And that does not necessarily mean like, this is not, I always have to be careful about this because people, I think, try to twist a lot of these things into conversations where people are accusing of xenophobia. That's not the case. It is just a concern about what is your guiding philosophy in the roster building process. And I worry a little bit if the philosophy becomes more around how do we copy Korea rather than how do we get 5 really good players, you know?
No, I fully agree. And I really do not like tolerating necessarily the mindset of Korea equal good. Like, yes, they're absolutely great. There's no doubt about it. But, you know, the reality is, like, we're in NA. This is an entirely different region. We obviously have import rules and whatnot. And so it's like you said, you cannot import 5 Koreans. It's not, at least in terms of how I build the roster, you know, you have to start off with your resident pieces. And, you know, looking at TL, obviously they have resident pieces who are able to achieve the speaking Korean aspect. And so, you know, you can applaud them for giving it a shot and seeing if it works because they did have the pieces that were available. So I'm interested to see how it works. And, you know, if their thesis or, you know, how the roster philosophy, however they came up with this, really actually comes to be.
Yeah. Mark, you haven't really weighed in on this much. I'm curious what your take is.
I mean, I think I kind of talked about a little bit about like the different aspects of it. I think for me, I want to get a little bit more clarification on like how they end up scrimming and like how their practicing is going. Because I do wonder, I am curious what their success will mean for the region. I think they'll be good. I'm pretty hopeful for them. But like, which aspects of it do people copy? Because Andrew talked a lot about like the building and the scouting and getting 5 good players. And, you know, will people copy just going after Korean speaking as like suddenly does that metric matter more going in the future? But I also wonder what it means about like schedule and practice and stuff like that.
Because you could end up in a world. Go ahead.
I was just going to finish by saying I have complained about North America's scrim culture a lot. And I hope that they are better and then people copy that aspect. I hope everyone's better.
What I do hope the aspect they do copy, though, is, you know, Harry and Yeon have been in their system for, you know, over a year now. And I think that's really what I want to take a look at from if that roster does have success, because, you know, those players know the organization, they understand it, they know all of that. So that's what I'm looking at.
I don't want the takeaway to be if you are 16 years old and interested in playing in the LCS, find out if your high school gives Korean lessons or find a local community college, because that's, for a while you had situations where I feel like Academy or NA resident players were like picking roles based off of like, oh, mid lane is a bad role, I shouldn't play mid because there's only one North American mid laner in the league. It's like, do we end up in a world where like we start seeing native American or Canadian players who speak Korean having far greater
dude, it'd be so funny if
potential.
all the fucking like mid laners in NA just start changing their names to be like more Korean. Like they take on like kind of like those stan accounts of K-pop stars or whatever.
I think the crazier thing to probably think about is how much your earning income would increase if you just knew Korean.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Ask the LCS Players Association, like, what is the average bilingual Korean-speaking player in LCS make this year versus, very interesting conversation. All right, thank you so much, Fierden and Mogul. We'll start with Fierden. Any shout-outs?
Nah, no shout-outs. Thanks for putting on the show, guys.
No shout-outs?
Shout out to I guess Alienware and Grubhub.
Thank you. Okay.
Giving you guys costs.
That's all I need. Thank you. Mogul, any shout-outs, any plugs here at the end?
A shout out to Alienware, Grubhub, and also to Teal Spawn, because man's been hyping up Harry for the longest time possible. And I just wanted to make sure that he was represented, because god damn does Harry deserve this opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the call, and we'll catch you both next time. Mark's super condensing the show by now pulling multiple callers at the same time.
What we've done dueling callers.
I don't know. I'm just teasing because I realized we only had 2 left, and so I was like, okay. Thank you to Milky AF for the Prime and Big Boy Brawler for the bits. We should have Mark. Mark is back now with Wafflefoot. Wafflefoot, where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm calling from Los Angeles, California.
Los Angeles, California. What do you want to talk about on the show?
Well, I mean, it's pretty simple, and it's a topic that I'm sure everybody is just overjoyed with reiterating again. But spring split doesn't matter currently, and I think that the LCS specifically should move past having spring split altogether, and instead switch to doing a major style season in the first half of the year prior to summer.
So how would the major style system play? Like, how would you make the major style system matter?
So the biggest thing about it is less focused on the direct impact to worlds and quote unquote mattering. The biggest benefits of having a system like this would be that it allows non-franchised organizations a more direct way to compete against franchised organizations. Gives more opportunity for up and coming players to stand out, playing against potentially those franchised organizations in a high stakes tournament. More importantly, and more critically, it'll reduce burnout amongst the current franchised NA player base by giving them, a bigger break period between Worlds and the start of Summer Split, where they really feel like, or where most teams, I would argue, feel like they really need to start their grind.
And the winner of this major still goes to MSI, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like find a way to tie it in like a league points system, something like that, where after the majors are done, whoever has the highest number of points, that's our representative for MSI. Maybe even explore more than just this person goes to MSI, but like also exploring the opportunity to have more international tournaments, like you're always saying that we should be doing. Take a weekend and jam out some games with some of the LCS.
So I don't want to go too far into the international stuff, just because I feel like that opens up like a whole nother can. But
yes, exactly.
What just before we throw to Mark and Andrew here to talk about it, like what what in your system or your proposed changes matters more? You know, like, because people say spring split doesn't matter because they say like it doesn't really have an impact on worlds, and like you can be 10th in spring and still make it to worlds and all that stuff. So in your system, what is making it matter?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that's making it matter to me, one, I do really think that the burnout thing is a consistent problem that we're seeing year over year. I think that this would help significantly with this, but additionally, one of the biggest benefits that I think you get from this is more events spread across the United States that have, or just NA in general, where the teams and the orgs have an opportunity to directly engage with the fan base that's around NA, stir up some of that, some of the fandom that we really feel like we've been lacking a lot over the past few years, and kind of hopefully reignite that passion for League that we've been missing for a while. I guess at the end of the go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
Yeah, I was just gonna say is at the end of the day, the swapping spring split for these major style tournaments for me is less about making spring split matter on a competitive level, because I feel like there are very few options that you have to be able to do that successfully. I feel I would look to repurpose that spring time to better serve these other needs, whether it's reducing burnout, giving organizations more flexibility with determining their final rosters, more direct engagement with fans, better opportunities for activations, etc. It's more of a scene health than competitive health.
My concern, as before I throw to these folks, is like the reason the spring split doesn't matter thing happened was because pro players would sort of talk about, and teams would kind of talk about how spring split doesn't matter to them, because they would feel like the ramifications are you get to go to MSI where there's a very limited number of teams competing, and it's a tournament that does not feel fairly significant. And I suspect that with the changes you are proposing, it would feel like it matters even less to these players and to these teams. And because Riot doesn't do a good job of marketing or championing its own opinions on topics, those people would just go out and say it doesn't even matter. It matters even less now. And it would become even more of a thing where people are feeling weird about it. But rather than you and I going back and forth on this, let me throw it over to Andrew Barton. Andrew Barton, what do you think of the idea of changing up spring in this way?
So I think I'd be more interested, like, if we talked about international majors. I think that's probably a much bigger conversation that we don't necessarily want to get into. But that's what I'm most interested in. I think spring split does matter. Making MSI is very big, and I think Jojo and Danny really saw the results of that and how big it was for them in terms of their improvement. But I think if we can just change MSI as a tournament and think of adjustments there, then I really think you won't see this whole deal about spring split not mattering and all that. Like, I think there is a way to make spring matter, and I don't necessarily agree with the major aspect, because one, I think that's going to cost too much money to be able to put on, so that just won't happen. And then that's pretty much the reason why I don't think it will happen. I'm not sure, Mark, do you have any takes on this?
I mean, the one thing I'll give wafflefoot the credit for is kind of saying, like, it doesn't matter, so target other things. I think the problem that normally people try and solve is they say, oh, I don't think spring matters, and then they suggest some things that still don't matter. Like, if you don't think spring matters right now, there's like no way to convince you to make spring matter, because you're trapped in the mindset that only worlds matters. And I really don't like, as Ender was saying in chat, like, I don't like things that tell me who the best team was 4 or 5 months ago, with different rosters, with different patches and different environments. Like, I like summer teams to go to Worlds. That's what I like. People who earn it that month leading into Worlds, or that 2 months or whatever. So, like, yeah, I don't really like solutions, and we've had, I would argue, bad teams attend Worlds before because of that. So I appreciate at least that wafflefoot isn't trying to solve that problem and just saying, well, since it doesn't matter anyways, let's just fix other things like burnout and whatnot. I don't think spring doesn't matter. AKA, I think spring matters. I don't agree with that notion. Like, I just don't think there's any. I think there's some sentiment behind it, but I don't think there's any like inertia to that idea, because Spring Split always does better viewership wise. People are excited to see the new rosters play. That matters. Winning a championship still matters, despite what people think. You know, like, people don't just pretend those Spring Split championships didn't happen. Like, if you won a championship in spring, guess what? Still matter. You go to MSI because you won. That matters a lot to people too. I think G2, you can tell me if I'm wrong, was happy to attend. Maybe they got burnt out from it and it was maybe not the best experience or something, but I assume you guys would prefer to have won and made it than not. It didn't not matter to you. So I push back on the entire idea that things don't matter in spring completely. That said, I'm not opposed to, like you said, examining what we can do with spring to make it better. And maybe that means, again, not to get into the international tournament conversation, but I do think MSI could use a hard look at what the hell the point of that tournament is.
Yeah, I if I was looking to solve spring, I would look to solve MSI. Because if getting to go if getting to go to MSI does not feel like it matters to teams, then I don't think it matters much what you do to Spring Split, because like that is the reward that you get for winning spring. So sorry, I can focus now. Mark it as his crazy filters. Anyway, so I think that's the biggest issue, is that right now, like if people think summer matters because you get to go to Worlds, and that they have overemphasized the importance of Worlds so much now that like it just makes MSI feel like a what is this tournament type deal. And if you somehow were able to solve MSI feeling like it doesn't matter that much, then I think Spring Split suddenly does matter. And maybe that's because maybe a world where you invite 2 teams from the major regions, or I don't know. Riot is always so afraid of doing anything that moves Worlds a little further down from its pedestal in comparison to the other events, that they're afraid to ever do anything that increases the other events. But I really do feel like that. I think, Mark did kind of bring me around on your point though, Wafflefoot, of like maybe you could do other things in spring that make it feel more interesting. Quite frankly, I feel like lock-in is a really good example of that, right? Where they're like, okay, people don't necessarily like the 9-week long Spring Split. Why don't we do lock-in in the beginning? Now, the problem is we're an import league where half of the players in the league are North American, or less than half are North American, and so they all have visa and green card issues, and so lock-in has become its own kind of failure. But I don't know. I think looking for alternatives is maybe a fair idea. I don't know. Andy, I know you kind of tossed a mark, but I don't know if you have any other follow-ups or thoughts on this stuff.
No, I think it goes back to somehow making adjustments to MSI and making that tournament more noteworthy. Because I think the one thing, and I think Dota falls into this trap a little bit, but you have TI and Worlds as kind of the pinnacle tournaments where everything is on the line. And while that is a cool storyline and you do love that, I do wish we had more lead up. And that's kind of why I spoke on international majors and how I feel there. And there's a ton to go into that, but make adjustments to MSI. I really do wish we had one more international tournament. That would make me feel a lot better. But if we can make the adjustments to MSI, I think that will lead to a better result from spring and how we feel about that. And really, that's probably the next step at this point.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much, Wafflefoot. Anything you want to shout out before we take a quick break?
Obviously got to give a shout out to the Hubest of Grubs. Actually had my call was delayed a little bit because my Grubhub got delivered right as the next caller was being pulled in. So shout out to Grubhub and their guarantee. Very happy that they've been a consistent sponsor for you throughout the years. And continued shout out to yourself and to Mark for running the show. Been a fan for a very, very long time, and excited to see where things go.
Thank you so much. Catch you next time. Perfect timing with Wafflefoot shout out of Grubhub, because it's time to talk about Grubhub. We love Grubhub. I just had food delivered by Grubhub earlier. I had some Thai food and some boba delivered from a Thai place that I really like. Actually, the place that I had in the dinner with episode with Kobe, where we had Thai food there. Or was it? Maybe no. I think it was Kobe. We had Thai food there. Either way, same place delivered by Grubhub again. Shout out to Grubhub. Right now, if you are, and how could you? But if you are somebody who has not used Grubhub yet, you can use TG Free Agency for $10 off your order of $25 plus. This is for new diners only, and it's until December 4th. So until through Sunday. So please, actually, especially if you haven't ever used Grubhub before, this is a great way to actually show Grubhub, especially as we're in renewal conversations with them at the end of the year, how much you support the show, because they see, people who have never signed up before for Grubhub signing up. I think that's a big thing for a brand, especially when they're using my code. So there's a link in the YouTube description for you to sign up. If you sign up with that link, it's actually very helpful. But regardless of if you sign up with that link, when you do sign up, please use code TG Free Agency, one word, TG Free Agency, for $10 off on your order of $25 plus. This is again through December 4th, which is Sunday. So thank you so much to Grubhub for sponsoring the show. We love Grubhub. They deliver awesome stuff. Mark is wearing their shirt
to help us out. Definitely make bot accounts and sign up. And tweet that you're going to boycott if they don't renew us.
Nope. Don't do that. Don't do that, please. Okay, Mark is going to go grab the next caller. Thank you to New Shoes Songs for the Prime and Smoke Dog for the 37 months. Really appreciate all of the subs. Mark is back. That was quick with Lazerfruit. Lazerfruit, where are you calling from?
I am calling from Southern Ontario.
From Ontario in Canada.
Yes.
Okay. What do you want to talk about on the show?
So I just wanted to say, as an EG fan, it was pretty disheartening to see that EG Prodigies was being dissolved. So I was wondering if Andy could give any insight behind the EG's decision to do that.
And really quickly, caller, can you also explain for folks who might not know what EG Prodigies was?
EG Prodigies was EG's amateur program, so similar to 100 Thieves Next. So it was like a tier 3 team, basically.
Gotcha. Okay. Andrew Barton getting grilled right now. Why no more Prodigies?
Yeah, so I think for us in Prodigies, obviously we've had the program for 2 years, and we've reaped a lot of benefits from it. It's produced us a lot of talent, and we've seen a lot of success from it. But for us going into 2023 and really what we're looking to do as an organization, I think, we had a lot of conversations on how do we improve the region, what do we need to do better to make players better and whatnot. And I think for us, we're trying to think of things a little differently where, we actually want to take a look at a lot of high school players and even middle school to an extent, because one big problem we're facing is just, a dying player population. I think we lost so many players to Fortnite, Minecraft, whatever the hell you want to call it. We took JoJo from
Among
Fortnite.
Us?
Yeah, Among Us, sure. We took JoJo from Fortnite and brought him into League. And, I don't want to sit here and say, the players in Challenger are kind of constant and that's it. But, we need to actually find new players and bring them into the ecosystem. And I think really that's how we're going to start to improve the region. And I really hope some of the high school work that we can prepare for 2023 can, really move us in that right direction. And we'll see how it goes. It's going to be a new experiment for us. But that's ultimately where we would kind of want to look to allocate some of those dollars potentially is in the high school sector.
Will you be scouting Fortnite and Among Us for more players?
I actually had a conversation with a few folks this offseason about going into Fortnite, talking to players. I want you to try League of Legends for a month, paying them whatever you want, and seeing how high some of them can get. Because I think in many top games, the skills are transferable. And I think if you saw a player climb up high enough, that might be a good sign for them. So, yeah, that conversation actually has happened.
So we have in Team Liquid people saying if they speak Korean, let's put them on the roster. And in EG, we have if they play Fortnite, let's put them on the roster.
It's a very
But
mechanical game, so
how do you know they're good at Fortnite when there's no matchmaking?
I haven't watched. Is that game still going on? I really haven't looked at Fortnite in like 2 or 3 years.
Wait, but you were
So
just
maybe that's
talking
a
about
bad
how
example.
you think Fortnite's a big deal, and you're not familiar with what's going on in the game.
Well, that might be a bad example. My point is there are other games out there. It could be Valorant now, where you have these high-level players, and you go, "I want you to try this game for a month. Let's see how you do." So Fortnite is legitimately just an example. You can do it with Minecraft, with CS:GO, Dota, Valorant, whatever the hell you want.
Do you know about how there's build and no build now in Fortnite?
I did see that,
my
and I thought the building was like pretty important for your mechanics. So I
Yeah.
don't
So are you like if they're good, but they're good at the no build part? Are you like
Then they're
not interested?
frauds.
maybe I shy away from them. I'll have to talk to JoJo about it, honestly.
Okay,
see what
yeah.
he thinks.
You should. You should.
I like how the problem for EG was that tier 3 was not having the impact it needed by investing in that. So now they're investing in tier 4, tier 5, whatever you want to call high school level. Is that it? You took the budget from Prodigies and broke it apart for high schoolers?
I think a little. I mean, it can definitely be looked at like that, and I would agree with that kind of. But I think you've seen a lot of other teams now come into amateur, and they're obviously going to be doing great work there. And I think we want to look to now do work elsewhere, and that's just the reality of it.
There's somebody in the chat was joking earlier saying there are no more Prodigies to have EG Prodigies, and I like it's a funny joke, but also is that was there an element to that where you're like we're having a hard time finding people like they're not enough players that make the jump to that pre-academy phase that you guys it's hard to field a team that way, or is that an issue you're running into?
It's not exactly like that, but I really, when I was taking a look at Prodigies and how much, we would get out of it in the years to come, it was really around 2023, 2024 where I started to get a little bit skeptical on, what is out there. And that's why I actually do have somewhat of a passion for finding players in other games, converting them into League of Legends or whatever you want, and trying to help build up the population that way. Because I think getting new players into League has to be the hardest thing.
Well, I guess we'll see how things go. Lazerfruit, what do you think of all this?
It's just nice to hear that EG is planning on doing something other than just completely abandoning like tier 3 and beyond.
So actually on that point, and I'm super happy that you're down to do the show here, and I think I don't want the fact that you're on the show to get lost when I point this out, but there have been several teams that have been putting out videos that are like, here's our like competitive, look going into like 2023. Is there any world where like EG could do something like that where, because people obviously are calling on the show curious about Prodigies. I think it's cool that you're on the show to be able to answer these types of questions. But I think having something where it's like you and GamerDoc and other people being like, and Kelsey, now that she's joined the team, doing something that's like, here's the Evil Geniuses League of Legends Direct with what we're looking for in the 2023 year. I know this is something you can't sign off on right now because you're not, as we've talked about so many times, in marketing or content, but I think this would be kind of cool.
I cannot sign off on it, but I think that is something I am going to talk to EG about because I think it's important to really have that transparency, and it's something I really believe in. I think it's, helps how you grow a fan base, all that good stuff. So it is something we'll work on and something I do want to give the fans ultimately.
Well, I think it's also nice because even if a lot of people don't watch it right then, like even if the video doesn't do very well, it's the type of thing where like 3 months from now, whenever there's like a thread on Reddit about how all the teams have abandoned amateur and blah, 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 there's like a video that, people will link back to potentially.
There's
in
a
the comments
TikTok of you running up to Zoomers with $20 in your hand saying, I bet you can't get bronze or gold or something. And,
that's a
exactly
different
what I want to
piece
do.
of content. It's a little different than what
We
suggesting.
did some stuff last year on our off season. It was like associated with Coinbase and whatnot. But it went through a little bit of that, like talking about the philosophies, why we're going through the players and such. And that was something I actually really enjoyed last year. That was kind of cool going back at and looking at, did a lot of those assumptions come correct and whatnot. So it's something I would love to do this offseason because, again, it just allows you to, figure out where your assumption's correct.
Listen, I've learned recently.
No.
I'm not saying this is true for you, Andrew, but I've learned recently, or the sense I'm starting to get is, if a piece of content from a League of Legends team is not sponsored, they're not interested in making it. So if anybody out there would like to sponsor a video of, them talking about all this stuff over at EG, please reach out to the EG sales team so that we can actually get this.
I didn't say that, so.
I know you did not say this. I'm saying I have learned this. Okay.
I also implied that when I was talking about how content gets made these days.
Yes, exactly. It's really the sales team that comes up with all the ideas. If you look at the content, it's pretty fucking clear. Okay.
All right, we got Jersey Mike's. How are we going to put Jersey Mike's in this video?
What if TGI sponsored it?
I mean, I'd be down. I don't know. We'd have to talk about production costs, but it does feel like nowadays. It does feel like nowadays if I want to see content in the LCS, I have to make it. So I'll look into it. Okay, thank you so much, Lazerfruit. Anything you want to shout out?
Sure. I will shout out the EG Discord for being wonderful people, and shout out to Nuggery, who announced his retirement earlier today as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the call, and we'll catch you next time.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Before I get to the next caller, I have to ask this question because people would be pissed if we didn't. Nicole spoke a little bit about Danny still being on the roster. I assume people watching this would appreciate whatever you can say as like an update or additive to what she already said, or if they missed it, you can reiterate. I think people would just be like, what the hell? You guys had an EG staff member on? You didn't talk about Danny? So what can you say about that situation?
Yeah, for Danny, he's still on contract with us, and he's going to be taking this next year off. He'll be at home. Really that's it. He did an incredible job for us, throughout the past year and a half we've had him. And I, have no interest in just dropping him, firing him and all that. He's earned quite a bit of what he's done. And so, he's on contract for us. And, if he ever wants to talk about coming back to play, whether, it's here or at another organization, we'll absolutely allow for that conversation.
Very good. Mark, you want to grab the next caller? Off Mark goes. Thank you to Numi for gifting a sub to Endercast. PP Doc, thank you for the Prime. Alvin as well, and Big Brawler again for the bits. Seanatonin is here. Sean, where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm calling from Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo, New York. And what do you want to talk about on the show?
I actually think that all the flack the TSM Academy roster is getting is misplaced, and I think it's fine, especially considering the Maryville, or rumored Maryville partnership for TSM.
Yeah, so I'm very curious about this. Has it been, because it felt like it was kind of a conflicting thing, where first we heard about this potential Maryville partnership. For those that don't know, there was a report that I think Wooloo did that was basically like TSM is looking at handing off managing its academy team or challenger team, whatever you want to call it, to University of Maryville or a similar type university, like a school that has a big interest in running that stuff. I think the skeptics among us felt as though that was kind of a cost-cutting measure more than anything. But then on the other hand, you had this report of their team that's coming out that supposedly was going to have 3 veterans on it, which feels a little different than like a collegiate team, unless all 3 of those players have decided to go back to school. So I don't know, Sean, if you have any insight on that stuff.
So the only thing I would say is that since it's like, if the partnership would have been announced like by now, which it hasn't been like officially announced, right? Then I would assume that like Maryville is like taking over for spring, right? And then that they would have had like full roster control. But since collegiate operates on a different time than LCS does, right? Like LCS is like calendar year, school is different, right? Their stuff starts in the fall. That this seems like a bridge of players for the TSM Academy roster, which I think it's fine when you look at all the names there. They're all people that like probably either live in LA or were in LA already, have experience to where like they're just either shaking off the rust in the events of like Wild Turtle, Sven, and Hanser. Triple's been out there in Academy for a while, and that if the rumored Maryville one does go through, and it does happen, then you should expect to see the changes with Maryville in mind happening come summer LCS for Academy. So I think it's better that we have veteran players who already probably live in LA playing for like a split, as opposed to trying to get new talent in there, especially if the deal's not done. And then after a semester, because we'll use the collegiate way or the split, being like, oh, everyone's spots up for grabs. Good luck, everybody, and for the people who moved over. And the only reason I say this is because like there are accounts from Seoul on like Twitter or like his DMs somewhere being like they only offered him like 50, 60K without housing to like live and play in LA.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be like Academy minimum, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not saying, and like again, I do think it is I understand the skeptics about like, oh, it's budget cutting, but at the end of the day, if this works out with Maryville, I think this is the best business move that TSM can make overall. And I think it, for someone like myself who has a real big fire for collegiate, it really sets the trend for like the way that we can start doing talent development in a different way.
So I think what people really were honing in on and were really upset about was this roster with the 3 veterans on it. So I think, setting aside the collegiate stuff, since we don't really know too much about that, we don't know when it'll start, if it is starting in summer, etc. I think maybe better now to focus on just the conversation around the 3 veteran roster.
Even Triple is like, I don't want to say he's like a completely known quantity or anything, but he did play a fair amount in Osh before coming over and being around, like you said, a little bit in the Academy system. So
do we want to say 4 veteran roster?
I think it's borderline 4. I mean, it's certainly not a new talent, in a sense.
So I like to call out TSM lately. This is a situation where I don't actually feel like there's much to call them out on. I think it is an issue for the Challenger League if the vast majority of the players competing in that league are veterans, but I don't think that is the case. And so one team running some players that have been around for a while, they introduce a bit of a different dynamic and different level of experience into the competition in the Challenger League, I think is actually maybe kind of a good thing. So I just did not see like outrage or feel the outrage about this type of stuff that I think a lot of other people did. And I mean, I feel similarly with the Double F Bjergsen stuff with 100 Thieves, right? Like I think it is fine to sprinkle in some veterans and experienced people into your pool of newer players. I think it is actually bad to have explicitly one way or the other in most cases. And so that's why I just don't, I agree with the take, is sort of setting aside the broader conversations about the collegiate side. I agree with the take because I just don't, if one team decides to do this, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And I actually do think it, like, they are somewhat only doing it to their own detriment if this collegiate thing doesn't work out, because it's unlikely that they'll have much trade value for these guys. But that does probably actually help the league in general. Mark,
yeah, I think
go ahead.
From my side at least, I don't understand necessarily the backlash on TSM, because at least the way I'm assuming it is probably they assume their roster is, at the bottom of the league, which I think is a good assumption to make. And so I'm kind of assuming they're hoarding assets in the Challengers League to be able to make the proper moves in spring to hopefully propel the roster forward into summer potentially. That's somewhat how I'm looking at it. So I don't even think they're looking at, talent development. This is more so just hoarding assets, which is a different way to view the system.
It's like a bench.
Yeah, exactly.
The 10-man roster strikes again. I mean, I kind of agree with that in the sense that, like, Solo, Boogie, and Neo with Sven, Hanser, and Turtle behind them could all possibly get moved around. And we know how much TSM likes changing their roster. So
very, very true. Very true.
Based. I just think the only thing, and just to finish up, is that, like, there have been, like, older players in the system. I mean, you can look at maybe like there are some people who are like, well, someone like Shogo didn't get a spot, but yet Wild Turtle's back playing, and that luckily like people like APA got in and Young got in from all those TLA ones. But that there are a few names that aren't in the Salt League currently on the franchise roster's second teams that like you're like, oh, I wish I would have seen them, but there's no more Darshan in the Salt League currently, and Hanser kind of takes like I guess the old man mantle from that. I also like Mark and Andrew's points about like this is also probably a roster that can swap interchangeably between each other. I just think that the overall TSM Academy like hate was incredibly overblown, especially when you look at the entirety of all the new names that have either been shuffled around or that have been put into the Salt League. So
I think it's really tough to have these kind of conversations at times because you don't necessarily know what TSM or any other organization is trying to utilize with their academy system. And so for me last year, my academy program was designed to make sure I can move JoJo up into 2022. And so each iteration of your academy should have different goals and functions, and it's really hard to talk about it when you just don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and then like correct me if I'm wrong, but like they didn't announce a coaching staff because they like let everybody go, right? So like they don't have a coaching staff, and I think that might bode well for like the idea that this Maryville thing does get going through. And if there's any collegiate program that I want like kind of doing this sort of undertaking, it would obviously be Maryville.
Yeah, and it conveniently saves TSM money.
Yeah, which is kind of something that y'all were talking about earlier.
I'm ignoring the business component here entirely.
Thank you so much, Sean, for the call. Anything you want to shout out before we say goodbye?
Yeah, sure. Shout out all the sponsors of TGI, Grubhub, and Alienware. Also, still love, you are rad as well, one of the former people who was on here to sponsor. Shout out the NA Men podcast people. We know that Travis really loves to have all of them on his Twitter circles and stuff, that he wants to keep them there forever. And shout out Andrew Barton, meeting him in Clutch Gaming all those years ago. Miss Clutch Gaming.
Very good. Thank you so much for the call, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.
All right.
So I had one more. It was going to be Ender, but then he left, and now he's
in
back,
the waiting
so
room.
I don't. Yeah. All right. Let's see what this Chucklefuck wants. I didn't even check his mic. I hope it's working.
Are we talking Valorant?
Ender, welcome to the show. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from a bunker, undisclosed location.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. What are you doing there?
I'm deciding what to do for 2023.
Okay. Any leading candidates or ideas?
Nothing is off the table.
Okay. You're desperate.
Is anything on the table?
Yeah, there's a lot of things on the table.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting. You're going to run TSM's academy team for the first split?
No, I'm going to take the main team.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah. Mark Z is actually my assistant coach.
Oh,
that's how I
he's
got,
getting
that's how
back
I got
into
in this
coaching.
call, actually.
I'm giving them the Delta Fox magic. When
Yeah.
0-16 or whatever we did, we're running it back again, baby.
What do you want to talk about on the show?
Well, I want to bring to light a new tournament format discussion to solve all of LCS's problems. Because, like, first of all, how do you measure LCS's success? A, do they make good content? B, do they sign Faker? Or C, do they become a world champion? I lean towards C personally. And now we all know that LCS has been modeling themselves on like traditional sports for a long time, but I don't think they've actually gone far enough. I think they need to model themselves off of the most successful sport in North America, baseball, right? And introduce their very own World Series where they can invite all of the best League of Legends teams from USA and Canada, making it a truly global event. They can actually run it concurrently with Worlds. And this way, and the kicker is, right, Worlds right now, it's only a BO5, which is just a full-on coin flip. Like, anyone can win on any given day, right? Like, DRX, they won Worlds. That's crazy, right? They beat Faker. That's just not possible. But this World Series would be a best-of-7 finals to truly decide who the best team in the world USA and Canada would
Now,
be.
is it
And
best
that
of
would be
7 or is
TSM.
it like first to 7 in best of 5s where it takes place over potentially 7 nights?
Well, yeah, it would be a 7-night event, and actually, you would swap between the two team stadiums. We're going to introduce stadiums as well.
Okay,
good. Both the teams only have one stadium in Los Angeles that they share, though. So does that mean it's just all in Los Angeles, or are we pretending one of the teams is from a different place during that time?
Well, CLG has Madison Square Garden. They can just go there.
and Golden
True.
Guardians have Chase
The
Center.
Chase Center. Yeah.
Yeah,
Solved.
Dignitas has that the New Jersey.
FlyQuest
channel.
has a thing now too, right?
Yeah, they have a forest.
Florida?
Oh yeah, yeah.
NHL?
We can go back
Somewhere
to Florida.
in Florida, right?
Yes.
Go back to the swamps.
And EG has the partnership with that random soccer team, right?
Yeah, but I think we're going to Europe for that.
Yeah, we So we have to go to Europe if we're going to play in
TSM
EG's.
can go to the islands. They can go to the Bahamas.
Oh,
Bankman Fried
you went with
and-
that. I thought you were going to go with the McDonald's joke. They could go to like a McDonald's and play there.
Bahamas is good.
In the Bahamas.
Yes.
It's the Cayman Islands.
Damn.
Oh my
That's
bad,
pretty
I
good, Mark.
forget. One
That's
of
pretty
those offshore places.
No, I think it is Bahamas is where FTX is based out of.
I'm sorry, Travis. I can't help but feel like you're not taking this suggestion very seriously.
I'm taking it as seriously as I take every other call on Hotline League.
I can say Team Canada would win for sure. I'd bet on Team Canada.
I would bet on Team Canada pretty quick over.
Didn't they
over
win
America.
the Sound Blaster Cup in 2012? The last time we ever had something like this. I think they did.
Don't forget the Civil
I don't
War
even
we
know what
did
that
as
is.
well. We did that LCS April Fool's Civil War Day.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Ender, for the call. Anything you want to shout out? Maybe
Yeah.
your employment link?
Well, I want to shout out Valorant for just being an infinitely more fun game than League of Legends. And
Okay,
I
well,
also
that
wanna
says a
shout
lot
out
about what your
Grubhub.
plans are for
I want to shout out
2023.
Grubhub, which is infinitely more enjoyable when you're playing Valorant and eating than when you're playing League of Legends and eating. Go Grubhub, go Valorant.
Maybe Ender made the smart decision. He foresaw the viewership dip in League and is like, I'm just going to get out.
Got it at the right time.
All right. Thank you so much, Ender. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
All right. That
All
is
right.
the show. Mark, what's up?
Wait, important question, Andrew. Have you watched all of Rings of Power yet?
No, I've never even heard of it.
What the fuck? It's the most expensive TV show ever made.
Oh, The Lord of the Rings? It's
Yeah.
on my to-do list to watch. I want to watch it.
Okay.
But I thought I heard it started off poorly.
I mean,
Anyway,
it
Mark,
kinda continued
after
that way.
after the show is done in 2 minutes, stay on stream. Whoever wants to stay on stream, and we will be talking. Mark and I will be having a quick conversation about Rings of Power. And if you're listening to this and you actually are curious about our conversation about Rings of Power, then you actually have to sub to go look at the VOD on Twitch.
You
'cause I'm
should
not
put it on
posting
Twitter after. You can clip it and put it on Twitter.
No,
Travis.
it's got spoilers. I don't put spoilers on Twitter.
Just put in the tweet that there's spoilers in the video, and then people won't watch it if they don't want to.
Yeah, that's a good way to get my Twitter account, lose the algorithm because then people aren't watching. It kills the watch
Oh my
time.
god, you fucking bum! You just don't want to do any work. I get it. You want subs for money because you don't care about your viewers. You want a paywall. You want to dono wall everyone's ass to watch a 2-minute discussion where I eviscerate you. Anyways, let's say goodbye.
Yesterday
to
at 5:00, I messaged Mark and said, "Should be Andrew Barton on Hotline League tomorrow to talk about what offseason was like this year." Then more than 24 hours later, Mark messages me and says, "Sounds like a banger. Maybe we keep it shorter today if it's dragging. Also walk tomorrow and resin refresh." And when I didn't reply within a 45-minute period, he said, "Good talk," sarcastically, despite the fact that it took him over a day to reply to the initial message. Then when I pointed it out, he tried to lecture me about how you should expect different things from different people in a relationship. And
yes, it's just basic relationship. I said, hold on. I stroked his ego here. I said, I take a long time to respond, but I need instant responses. You, a more well-balanced human, can handle my temperamental nature.
That's a good response in there. I agree with that.
it's been many years of me, a more well-balanced human, handling Mark's temperamental nature. And I'm gotta
It's not
say,
gonna
I'm not
change. That's
sure.
the point of a relationship.
I'm not sure
You don't
how much
change
longer I
someone
will be well
necessarily.
balanced because I'm starting to become a little
Let's
unbalanced.
let Andrew get out of here. I've been trying to let him do his shout outs for like 10 minutes now, so we can
Andrew,
talk about some power.
you were the one that derailed this. Andrew,
You brought up Facebook.
what do you want to shout out?
No, not too much. Shout out to EG. Shout out to our off season. Really excited to get to work with FBI someday, and Freeze going into next year. Kelsey as well, who's come back. So no, I'm just looking forward to next year. I think my expectations for us are going to be MSI and Worlds, and I hope to have FlyQuest and C9 be joining us.
Mark, what do you want to shout out?
Are we doing Resident Refresh tomorrow? We should do it.
No, I've got stuff tomorrow. Wednesday or Thursday are
wanna
kind of
walk?
more open for me, though.
Or it's not good for you either for a walk.
I can do a walk tomorrow.
Let's do Resident Refresh instead then.
No. We don't do an hour-long walk, Mark.
I caught you, you little
No,
weasel.
when we walk for 25 minutes.
It'll be a 25-minute Resident Refresh. All right, no, I don't have anything to shout out. Probably going to do a blame game this week.
Probably?
Whatever.
I thought you were definitely. We didn't do it last week.
Yeah, who knows? We'll see if I find any energy tomorrow.
Well, instead of doing Resident Refresh, do a blame game.
Maybe I'll do that instead of the walk.
Oh, I see. Okay. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. I did an interview with Brandon Sanderson, which hit on my channel today. We don't talk too much about his books, and there's only spoilers at the very end. And it is a very fun interview, even if you don't normally read his stuff. Drew, who edited it for me, has never read any Brandon Sanderson stuff, and told me, he's like, I really like that interview. That was really fun and interesting. We talk a lot about games. We talk about Arcane. We talk about a lot of different stuff. So please go watch it on my YouTube channel because I feel bad if I interview him and nobody watches it because I put it on the main channel. Anyway, thank you so much. We'll do Hotline League next week. Hope you all had a good time during the holidays, and thanks to Andy for coming on. Bye.